The morning alarm screamed across Proxima Station at exactly 600 hours. Hyunwoo Kim rolled out of his narrow bunk and landed hard on the cold metal floor. His knees buckled slightly from the impact. Around him, dozens of other cadets were already moving with practiced ease. The difference was obvious immediately. While Hyunwoo struggled to his feet, the Vorthak cadets simply uncoiled their powerful reptilian bodies and stood in one smooth motion. Their scales caught the harsh artificial light as they stretched muscles that could crush steel. The Nexari cadets chimed softly as their crystalline bodies rang like bells, their faceted surfaces reflecting rainbow colors across the dormitory walls. But it was the Gorvani that made Hyunwoo feel truly small. These massive beings stood nearly 3 meters tall, their thick gray skin like natural armor. When they moved, the floor vibrated under their weight. One of them, a cadet named Thok, accidentally bumped into Hyunwoo while reaching for his equipment locker. The gentle touch sent the human stumbling backward into the wall. "Sorry, little one," Thok rumbled in his deep voice. There was no malice in the words, but Hyunwoo still felt heat rise to his cheeks. At 19 years old and barely 1.7 meters tall, he was indeed little compared to everyone else here. Hyunwoo quickly pulled on his training uniform. The fabric hung loose in some places and pulled tight in others. Everything at the academy was designed for average galactic physiology, which meant it fit almost everyone except humans. His boots were too big, his belt needed extra holes, and his helmet wobbled when he moved too fast. The mess hall was a cathedral of noise and alien conversation. Hyunwoo grabbed his meal tray and looked around for an empty seat. The Vorthak cadets sat together, their forked tongues flicking out to taste their raw meat breakfast. The Nexari gathered in perfect geometric formations, sharing energy crystals that glowed and pulsed. The Gorvani occupied an entire section, their massive forms requiring specially reinforced furniture. And there, at a small table in the corner, sat the other human cadets. Hyunwoo made his way over and sat down next to Daeho Park, a stocky young man from Busan with calloused hands and a ready smile. Across from them sat Soo-Jin Lee, who was studying a tactical manual while eating, and Won-Bin Choi, who was tinkering with a broken communication device. "Morning, Hyunwoo," Daeho said cheerfully. "Ready for another day of being the worst at everything?" Soo-Jin looked up from her book. "Speak for yourself." "I aced the orbital mechanics test yesterday." "Because orbital mechanics is just math," Won-Bin replied without looking up from his device. "Try keeping up in combat drills when your plasma rifle weighs more than you do." It was true. The standard-issue plasma rifle was designed for Gorvani strength levels. For humans, carrying it was like lugging around a small tree. Hyunwoo had developed permanent bruises on his shoulder from the weapon's recoil. "Did you hear what happened in Delta Squadron yesterday?" Soo-Jin asked quietly, leaning forward. 3 of their human cadets requested transfers to non-combat roles. The table fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Washing out of combat training was essentially admitting that humans didn't belong in the Galactic Defense Force. It was a path back to Earth with their heads hanging in shame. "I don't blame them," Won-Bin muttered. "Yesterday in equipment training I couldn't even activate the targeting system on the heavy cannon. My hands are too small for the controls." "The Nexari cadets think we're cute pets," Daeho added. "I heard Xylith telling her friends that humans are like adorable little warriors who try really hard." Hyunwoo pushed his synthetic protein around his plate. The food was nutritious but bland, designed to meet the dietary needs of a dozen different species without actually tasting good to any of them. "At least they think we're trying hard." "The Vorthak don't even think that," Soo-Jin said grimly. "I heard Sergeant Krev telling the instructors that bringing humans into the academy was a waste of resources." As if summoned by his name, Sergeant Krev's voice boomed across the mess hall. "All cadets report to Training Ground 7 in 10 minutes. Combat readiness evaluation begins now." The massive Vorthak instructor stood at the front of the hall, his yellow eyes scanning the crowd. His scarred hide told the story of countless battles, and the 3 parallel marks across his snout were proof he had faced Ravager claws and lived. When his gaze fell on the human table, his expression turned to what might have been disgust. "Move, cadets," Krev snarled. "The enemy will not wait for you to finish your breakfast." The scramble to Training Ground 7 was chaos. Hyunwoo struggled to keep up as the other species moved with natural grace and speed. The Vorthak cadets slithered forward on their powerful lower bodies, covering ground faster than human legs could manage. The Nexari moved in perfect synchronization, their crystalline forms chiming in harmony. The Gorvani simply pushed through any obstacle with brute force. By the time Hyunwoo reached the training ground, he was breathing hard and sweating. The other cadets looked fresh and ready. Even the other humans had arrived before him, though they looked just as worn out. Training Ground 7 was a massive chamber that could simulate any battlefield environment. Today it was configured as an asteroid mining facility, complete with low gravity, narrow corridors, and dangerous industrial equipment. Today you will work in mixed species squads, Sergeant Crave announced. Your objective is to secure the mining facility from hostile forces. You have 1 hour to plan and execute your mission. The cadets quickly formed into groups. Hyunwoo found himself assigned to Squad Theta with Xylith the Nexari, a Vorthak named Sisk, and a young Gorvani called Morok. Looking around, he realized the squads had been carefully balanced. Each had representatives from the major species, including exactly one human. All right, team, Morok rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. I will lead the frontal assault. My armor can absorb enemy fire while I advance. I can interface with the facility's computer systems, Xylith chimed, her crystalline voice like wind chimes. I can disable security measures and unlock passages. I will provide stealth reconnaissance, Sisk hissed, his reptilian form already beginning to change color to match the walls. My natural camouflage will allow me to scout enemy positions. All three turned to look at Hyunwoo expectantly. He felt his stomach sink as he realized he had nothing unique to offer. No natural armor, no computer integration abilities, no camouflage, no enhanced strength or speed. I can, he started, then stopped. What could he do? I can carry supplies? There was an awkward silence. Even Xylith, who had always been kind to him, looked uncomfortable. Right, Morok said finally. Supply duty. Very important. The hour of preparation was humiliating. While his squad mates planned tactical approaches and studied facility blueprints, Hyunwoo was relegated to organizing ammunition and medical supplies. He could hear other squads making similar decisions about their human members. When the exercise began, it went exactly as Hyunwoo had feared. Morok charged through the main entrance, soaking up simulated enemy fire with his thick hide. Sisk disappeared into the ventilation system, his camouflage making him nearly invisible. Xylith plugged into a computer terminal and began rapidly shutting down automated defenses. Hyunwoo followed behind, carrying extra power cells and first aid equipment, feeling useless and stupid. The exercise ended with Squad Theta achieving their objective in 37 minutes. It was a respectable time, and Sergeant Krev nodded approvingly as he reviewed their performance. Adequate work, the instructor said. Morok, your direct assault was properly executed. Sisk, excellent use of natural abilities for reconnaissance. Xylith, efficient systems integration. He turned to Hyunwoo last. Human. You carried supplies without dropping them, congratulations. The sarcasm in his voice made several cadets snicker. Hyunwoo felt his face burn with embarrassment. After the exercise, Hyunwoo walked slowly back to his quarters. The day's failures played over and over in his mind. He had tried so hard to prove himself, but what was the point? Every other species had clear advantages. Humans were just ordinary mammals trying to compete with beings who had evolved for war. His room was small and cramped, designed for creatures much larger than himself. The furniture was too big, the ceiling too high, everything a constant reminder that he didn't belong here. He activated his personal communication terminal and waited for the connection to Earth. After a few moments, his sister's face appeared on the screen. Jiun looked tired but smiled when she saw him. Hyunwoo, how are things at the academy? He wanted to tell her everything, about the mockery, the impossible equipment, the constant feeling of being a burden on his squad. Instead, he forced a smile. It's challenging, he said. The other species are really impressive. They all have these amazing natural abilities. And what do you have? Jiun asked. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. What did he have? No claws, no armor, no enhanced strength. Just a human brain and a human body that seemed designed for a much safer world than this one. I don't know, he admitted finally. Sometimes I think I made a mistake coming here. Hey, Jiun said firmly. Remember what Dad always told us about the Kim family? Despite everything, Hyunwoo smiled slightly. We don't give up. That's right. No matter how hard things get, we keep going. You're representing all of humanity up there. 3 months had passed since Hyunwoo's first disastrous day at the academy. The daily routine had become familiar, even if it remained difficult. Wake up at 0600, struggle with equipment that didn't fit, endure training exercises designed for beings twice his size, and fall into bed exhausted each night. Some things had improved. Hyunwoo could now carry the plasma rifle for entire training sessions without collapsing. His marksmanship scores were actually decent when he could manage to hold the weapon steady. Sujin had figured out how to modify the targeting systems for smaller hands, and Wonbin had learned to jury-rig equipment that actually worked for human physiology. But they were still the weakest cadets in every measurable way. That morning started like any other. Hyunwoo was in the equipment bay, trying to adjust his combat armor for the 100th time, when the emergency klaxon began wailing throughout the station. The harsh sound echoed off the metal walls, followed immediately by Commander Thane's voice over the intercom. All cadets and instructors report to main assembly immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The equipment bay emptied in seconds as cadets rushed toward the assembly hall. Hyunwoo struggled to keep up, his armor clanking awkwardly with each step. By the time he reached the massive chamber, hundreds of beings were already gathered in perfect formation. Commander Thane stood on the raised platform at the front of the hall. The massive Gorvani officer was even larger than most of his species, his gray skin marked with ritual scars that indicated his high rank. His forearms moved with practiced military precision as he activated the holographic display behind him. 43 minutes ago, we received this transmission from the mining colony on Kepler 442b, Thane announced. The hologram flickered to life, showing a desperate-looking Nixari female. Her crystalline body was cracked and dim, and emergency lights flashed behind her. This is Colony Administrator Prex of New Crystalline. We are under attack by Ravager forces. Repeat, the Ravagers have found us. Our defense grid is failing. We have approximately 6,000 colonists who need immediate evacuation. Please, if anyone receives this message, we need help now. The transmission cut to static, leaving the assembly hall in stunned silence. Hyunwoo felt his blood turn to ice. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Ravagers. They were biomechanical nightmares, part living creature and part machine. No one knew where they had originally come from, but they swept across star systems like a plague, consuming everything in their path. The situation is critical, Commander Thane continued. The colony's fusion reactor is showing signs of instability. If it breaches, the explosion will destroy everything within 50 kilometers. We estimate 30 minutes before total catastrophe. The holographic display changed to show tactical readouts. Hyunwoo could see the colony layout, a cluster of domed buildings connected by transport tunnels. Red markers indicated Ravager positions completely surrounding the settlement. All available forces are being deployed immediately, Thane announced. This includes advanced training cadets. You will be divided into tactical units based on your species' natural abilities and combat specializations. Sergeant Krev stepped forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. Vorthak cadets will lead frontal assault teams. Your natural armor and combat instincts make you ideal for direct engagement with Ravager ground forces. A group of reptilian cadets straightened with pride. Hyunwoo had seen them in training. They could move like lightning and their scales could deflect small arms fire. In close combat, they were absolutely deadly. Nexari cadets will handle technical infiltration, Thane continued. Your ability to interface directly with computer systems will be essential for disabling Ravager tech and coordinating the evacuation. The crystalline beings chimed softly in acknowledgement. Hyunwoo had watched Xylith plug into computer terminals and process information faster than any organic brain could manage. If anyone could hack Ravager systems, it would be the Nexari. Gorvani cadets will provide heavy weapons support, Thane rumbled. Your strength will be needed to operate the siege cannons and breach enemy fortifications. The massive gray-skinned beings nodded solemnly. Hyunwoo had seen them in weapons training. They could carry equipment that would require entire teams from other species, and their thick hide could withstand explosions that would kill anyone else. Then came the moment Hyunwoo had been dreading. Human cadets, Commander Thane said, his voice taking on a dismissive tone, will be assigned to rearguard support duties. Supply management, medical evacuation, and communication relay. Stay out of the combat zones and try not to get in the way. The words hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. Around him he could hear alien cadets snickering quietly. Even Xylith, who had always been kind, couldn't quite meet his eyes. Deho stepped forward. "Sir, we've been training for combat operations just like everyone else." Commander Thane's expression darkened. "Cadet Park, your species has no natural weapons, minimal physical strength, and fragile biology. In a combat situation against Ravagers, you would be liabilities, not assets. The rearguard assignments are not suggestions." "But sir," Sujin tried to interject. "Enough," Sergeant Krev hissed. "The human cadets will report to Supply Coordinator Vex for rear area assignments. Everyone else prepare for immediate deployment." The assembly hall erupted into controlled chaos as cadets rushed to their assignments. Hyunwoo stood frozen as his alien classmates streamed past him toward the armory and transport bays. Within minutes, the hall was nearly empty except for the 4 human cadets and a bored-looking Nexari supply officer. "You are the humans, yes?" Coordinator Vex asked, her voice carrying the musical quality all Nexari possessed. "I have medical evacuation shuttles that need supply manifests updated. Also, communication relay equipment requires basic maintenance." Wonbin kicked at the floor with his boot. "Supply manifests," while everyone else is fighting monsters. "The Ravagers aren't just monsters," Sujin said quietly, studying the tactical display that was still active. "Look at their formation patterns. These positions aren't random." Hyunwoo walked closer to examine the hologram. The red markers showing Ravager positions did seem to follow some kind of logic. They had completely encircled the colony, but their placement created overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. "They're smart," he realized. "This isn't a random attack. They've studied the colony layout and positioned themselves for maximum tactical advantage." "Of course they're smart," Coordinator Vex said impatiently. "Ravagers are highly adaptive biomechanical entities. They learn from every encounter. That is why they are so dangerous. Now can you please focus on the supply manifests?" But Hyunwoo couldn't focus on paperwork. His mind was racing as he studied the tactical display. The Ravager positions, the colony layout, the evacuation routes. Something was bothering him about the whole situation. "They're not trying to destroy the colony," he said suddenly. Deho looked up from a crate of medical supplies. "What do you mean?" "They're attacking it. No, look at their weapon signatures. See these energy readings? They're using containment fields, not destruction weapons. And their positions, they're set up to prevent escape, not to level the buildings." Sujin joined him at the display. "You're right. If they wanted to destroy the colony, they could have just bombarded it from orbit. Instead, they landed ground forces and surrounded it. They want something," Wonbin realized. "The question is what?" Coordinator Vex had stopped pretending to work on inventory and was listening intently. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet," Hyunwoo admitted. "But standard galactic military doctrine assumes the Ravagers are mindless destroyers. What if that's wrong? What if they have specific objectives?" Through the observation windows, they could see the first wave of assault shuttles launching from the station's docking bays. Fortak Nexari and Gorvani cadets were heading into battle with weapons and equipment that had been perfected over centuries of galactic warfare. But what if centuries of galactic warfare had taught them the wrong lessons? Hyunwoo pulled up more detailed scans of the colony. "There," he said, pointing to a specific building. "The Geological Survey Station. It's right in the center of the Ravager formation." "So?" Deho asked. "So Kepler 442b was chosen as a mining colony because of unusual mineral deposits, rare elements that don't exist anywhere else in this sector." Hyunwoo felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. What if the Ravagers aren't here for the colonists? What if they're here for the minerals? Sujin was already pulling up geological surveys on a secondary display. "These elements, some of them are theoretical, elements that shouldn't be able to exist in stable form under normal conditions. But they do exist here," Wonbin said, understanding dawning in his voice. "And if someone could figure out how to synthesize them, you could build weapons that current galactic technology couldn't defend against." Hyunwoo finished. The 4 humans stared at each other as the implications sank in. If they were right, then the entire battle plan was based on false assumptions. The Ravagers weren't there to destroy. They were there to steal something that could make them unstoppable, and the Galactic Defense Force was walking into a trap. "We have to warn them," Deho said. Coordinator Vex was. The tactical display in the communication center showed the first wave of galactic forces approaching Kepler 442b. Red dots representing Ravager positions remained unchanged, but new blue markers showed the advancing assault teams. Everything was proceeding according to standard military doctrine. Hyunwoo watched the display with growing unease. "How long until first contact?" he asked Coordinator Vex. "Approximately 18 minutes, she replied, her crystalline fingers dancing across the control interface. "The Vorthak advance guard should engage Ravager perimeter forces first." Wanbin was hunched over a secondary console, pulling up every piece of data he could find about previous Ravager encounters. "Look at this," he said. "Battle of Theta Prime 3 years ago. Galactic forces used standard frontal assault tactics. They won but suffered 60% casualties. Here's another one," Sujin added, reading from her own terminal. "Zeta Station defense. Same tactics, same result. High casualties barely managed to drive off the Ravagers." "That's how galactic military works," Daeho pointed out. "Acceptable losses in exchange for tactical objectives. Every species has natural advantages that make them nearly impossible to kill in large numbers." Hyunwoo nodded, but something was still bothering him. "Except humans don't have natural advantages. We had to develop something else to survive." "What do you mean?" Coordinator Vex asked. Before Hyunwoo could answer, the first combat report started coming in. Commander Thane's voice crackled over the communication system, transmitted from his command ship. "First contact with Ravager forces confirmed. Vorthak assault teams engaging hostiles at grid reference 77 Alpha. The tactical display updated in real time. Blue markers representing Vorthak cadets were advancing toward the colony's outer perimeter. The red Ravager positions seemed to shift slightly, but remained in their defensive formation. Enemy resistance is lighter than expected," came another report. "Vorthak teams report successful penetration of outer defenses." Hyunwoo frowned. That didn't match what he was seeing on the display. The Ravager positions hadn't collapsed or retreated. They had simply adjusted. "Nexari infiltration teams report successful interface with colony computer systems," another voice announced. "Beginning evacuation coordination protocols." More reports flooded in over the next few minutes. The Gorvani heavy weapons teams had set up firing positions and were providing cover for the advancing forces. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Then the trap was sprung. "Unknown energy signature detected," a panicked voice reported. "Multiple Ravager units emerging from underground positions. They were waiting for us." The tactical display exploded into chaos. New red markers appeared everywhere as Ravager forces emerged from hidden tunnels throughout the colony. The neat battle lines disappeared as the aliens found themselves surrounded and outnumbered. "All teams, fall back to secondary positions," Commander Thane ordered. "Repeat, execute tactical withdrawal." But there were no secondary positions. The Ravagers had anticipated the Galactic response perfectly. They had studied centuries of military doctrine and prepared for exactly this type of assault. "Vorthak Team 3 is cut off," came another desperate transmission. "Request immediate support." "Nexari infiltration teams are trapped in the computer core," another voice added. "Ravager biotech is adapting to our interface protocols." Hyunwoo watched the disaster unfold with growing horror. Everything the Galactic forces were doing was predictable, based on established tactical doctrine that every species learned from childhood. The Ravagers had clearly studied that doctrine and prepared counters for every move. "They're not just smart," he realized. "They're students. They've been watching Galactic military operations for years, learning how we fight." "But that's impossible," Coordinator Vex protested. "Military doctrine is based on the natural advantages of each species. Vorthak stealth, Nexari technical integration, Gorvani heavy assault. These are evolutionary advantages developed over millions of years." "Exactly," Sujin said, understanding dawning in her voice. "And that's why they can predict everything. Biological advantages create predictable tactics." Wanbin looked up from his console. "But humans don't have biological advantages. Our tactics had to come from somewhere else." Daeho was nodding slowly. "We had to learn to think around problems instead of through them." Hyunwoo felt something click in his mind. Back on Earth, humans had been persistence hunters. Not the fastest or strongest predators, but the ones who never gave up and always found a way. They had survived ice ages not through thick fur or hibernation, but by making tools and changing their behavior. "Pull up the geological surveys again," he said. Suddenly, Sujin brought up the mineral composition data for Kepler 442b. "What are you looking for?" "There." Hyunwoo pointed to a specific reading. Unstable exotic matter deposits throughout the colony's foundation. The Ravagers aren't just here for the minerals on the surface. The entire colony is sitting on top of what they want, Wonbin realized. Which means they can't just take it, Daeho added. They need to extract it carefully or risk destabilizing the whole deposit. That's why they're not using heavy weapons, Sujin said. And why they're keeping the colonists alive. They need the mining equipment and the expertise to extract the exotic matter safely. Hyunwoo was thinking fast now, his mind racing through possibilities the way his ancestors had tracked prey across endless grasslands. They're not trying to win a battle. They're trying to buy time. Keep our forces busy while they complete the extraction. How long would that take? Coordinator Vex asked. Wonbin was already running calculations. With the colony's current equipment, maybe 6 hours to extract enough exotic matter to power a fleet. 6 hours to build weapons that could destroy entire star systems, Sujin said quietly. The communication system crackled with more bad news. Gorvani heavy weapons ineffective against adaptive Ravager armor. Request permission to use orbital bombardment. Negative, Commander Thane replied. Too many civilians still in the colony. Continue ground assault. Hyunwoo closed his eyes and tried to think like a Ravager. They were biomechanical entities, part living creature and part machine. They adapted quickly to new threats, but adaptation took time and energy. What if instead of trying to overpower them, you confused them? They've studied galactic military doctrine, he said slowly. But have they studied human military history? The other humans looked at him with growing understanding. Guerrilla warfare, Daeho said. Hit-and-run tactics. Asymmetric warfare, Sujin added. Using the enemy's strength against them. Psychological warfare, Wonbin finished. Making them think something that isn't true. Coordinator Vex looked confused. These are human concepts? These are survival concepts, Hyunwoo corrected. Humans developed them because we had to. When you can't win through strength, you win through cunning. But you are just cadets, Vex protested, and humans are considered the weakest species in the academy. Exactly, Hyunwoo said with a growing smile. Nobody expects anything from us. We're invisible, he turned to his fellow humans. The Ravagers have planned for every possible galactic response except one. They haven't planned for the species that doesn't follow galactic military doctrine. What are you proposing? Sujin asked. We go down there, Hyunwoo said. Not as part of the organized assault, but as something completely unexpected. 4 humans with improvised equipment and tactics they've never seen before. That's suicide, Daeho pointed out. We're barely passing our training exercises. We're barely passing exercises designed for other species, Hyunwoo corrected. But this won't be an exercise designed for other species. This will be a problem that requires human solutions. Coordinator Vex was shaking her head. Commander Thane explicitly ordered you to remain in rear support roles. Commander Thane is losing, Wonbin said bluntly. His tactical doctrine is exactly what the Ravagers prepared for. Hyunwoo walked over to the equipment lockers that lined the communication center. Inside were emergency supplies, basic tools, and maintenance equipment. Nothing designed for combat, but humans had never been designed for combat either. Earth history is full of stories about ordinary people doing impossible things, he said, pulling out a basic plasma cutter. David and Goliath. The Battle of Thermopylae. The Warsaw Uprising. Every time it was people who weren't supposed to win finding a way to win anyway. Those are just stories, Vex protested. No, Sujin said, moving to join Hyunwoo at the equipment locker. Those are our people. That's what humans do when everything seems hopeless. Daeho was nodding slowly. My grandfather fought in the Korean War. He always said the key to survival wasn't being the strongest or the smartest. It was being the most stubborn. And being willing to try things nobody else would think of, Wonbin added, grabbing a maintenance toolkit. Hyunwoo looked at his 3 companions. 3 months ago, they had been failures, the weak links in every training exercise. But right now, they might be the only ones who could think outside the tactical box that was getting everyone else killed. We'll need to get to the colony without being detected by either side, he said. And then we'll need to do something nobody expects. What exactly? Sujin asked. Hyunwoo studied the geological survey data one more time. An idea was forming, dangerous, and the situation on Kepler 442b was deteriorating rapidly. Commander Thane's voice over the communication system had lost its confident military bearing. and now carried the strain of a leader, watching his carefully planned operation fall apart. Vorthak. Team 1 is completely surrounded. Nexari infiltration units report biomechanical countermeasures adapting faster than they can compensate. Garvani heavy weapons are having minimal effect on enemy armor. Hyunwoo listened to the reports while strapping emergency equipment to his modified combat harness. The gear was all wrong for military use but perfect for what he had in mind. Plasma cutters, geological survey tools, maintenance equipment, and a portable atmospheric processor that Wonbin had jury-rigged into something that might actually work. Estimated time until colony reactor breach? Sujin asked Coordinator Vex. The Nexari officer checked her readings. Approximately 22 minutes. The fusion containment is becoming unstable due to vibrations from the combat. And how long until the Ravagers complete their exotic matter extraction? At current rate, perhaps 40 minutes. Daeho finished loading supplies into their commandeered maintenance shuttle. So either the reactor explodes and kills everyone, or the Ravagers get enough exotic matter to build planet-killing weapons. Unless we do something nobody expects, Hyunwoo said. Coordinator Vex made one last attempt to talk them out of their plan. I must protest this course of action. You are cadets, not experienced soldiers. This mission has zero chance of success according to any tactical analysis. Good, Wonbin replied, activating the shuttle's engines. If it had a chance of success, the Ravagers would have planned for it. The maintenance shuttle was not designed for stealth or combat. It was a simple utility vehicle used for routine station repairs. But that anonymity was exactly what made it perfect for their needs. The Ravagers would be watching for military transports, not garbage haulers. As they undocked from Proxima Station, Hyunwoo could see the battle raging in the distance. Flashes of energy weapons lit up the space around Kepler 442b like a deadly fireworks display. Galactic Defense Force ships were maintaining a defensive perimeter, while ground forces tried desperately to break through Ravager positions. Incoming transmission from Command, Sujin reported from the communications station. Commander, Thane's voice filled the shuttle cabin. Unidentified transport, you are entering a restricted combat zone. Identify yourself immediately. Hyunwoo activated the response system. This is Maintenance Shuttle 7 carrying emergency repair supplies to the colony. We have authorization from Coordinator Vex. There was a pause. Then Thane's voice returned heavy with suspicion. Maintenance personnel are not authorized for combat zones. Return to station immediately. Sir, the colony's atmospheric processors are failing. Without immediate repair, the evacuation shuttles won't have breathable air for the civilians. It was technically true. Wonbin had identified several failing systems in the colony's infrastructure. The fact that they weren't planning to repair those systems was a detail they didn't mention. Another pause. Then, reluctantly, acknowledged Maintenance 7. Proceed with extreme caution and report to ground control upon arrival. Will do. Commander. Hyunwoo cut the transmission and slumped back in his seat. Lying to superior officers was definitely not covered in military protocol, but then again, nothing they were about to do was covered in military protocol. The shuttle approached Kepler 442b through a carefully planned route that avoided the main battle zones. Instead of heading for the primary landing platforms where Galactic forces were trying to establish a beachhead, they aimed for the colony's industrial district where the mining equipment was located. Ravager Patrol, bearing 27 Mark V, Daeho reported from the sensor station. Through the shuttle's small viewport, Hyunwoo could see the biomechanical entities for the first time. They were nightmare combinations of living tissue and advanced technology, constantly shifting and adapting their forms for optimal efficiency. Some looked like metallic insects the size of shuttlecraft. Others resembled organic machines that defied easy description. They're not scanning us, Sujin observed. We really are invisible to them. For now, Wonbin muttered. Once we start doing what we're planning to do, they'll notice us pretty quickly. The shuttle touched down in a maintenance bay deep within the colony's industrial complex. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across abandoned equipment and empty corridors. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sounds of battle as Galactic forces tried to push toward the residential areas where civilians were trapped. Geological survey shows the exotic matter. Deposits are concentrated directly below the main mining shaft, Sujin said, consulting her portable scanner. Depth of approximately 200 meters. Can we reach them? Hyunwoo asked. The mining elevators are still functional. Daeho confirmed. Emergency power is keeping essential systems online. They moved quickly through the abandoned facility, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The colony had been evacuated hastily, leaving behind personal belongings and half-finished meals that gave the place a ghostly atmosphere. Motion sensors ahead, Wanbin warned. 3 contacts moving this way. They pressed themselves against the wall as a Ravager patrol passed by. Up close, the biomechanical entities were even more disturbing. Their forms shifted constantly, organic components merging seamlessly with technological systems. One of them paused directly in front of their hiding spot, its sensor array scanning the area. Hyunwoo held his breath, fighting the urge to run. Everything depended on remaining undetected until they could reach the mining shaft. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the Ravager patrol moved on. The 4 humans waited until the corridor was clear, then continued toward their objective. The main mining shaft was a vast cylindrical opening that descended deep into the planet's crust. Specialized equipment lined the walls, designed to extract and process the rare minerals that made Kepler 442b valuable. At the bottom of the shaft, Hyunwoo could see the faint glow of exotic matter deposits. There, he said, pointing to a control panel near the elevator entrance. The main extraction system. If we can overload it, the entire deposit becomes unstable, Sujin finished, creating a threat the Ravagers can't ignore, but also creating a real risk of planetary destruction, Daeho pointed out. Only if we actually trigger it, Wanbin said. The idea is to make them think we're crazy enough to do it. Are we crazy enough to do it? Sujin asked. Hyunwoo considered the question seriously. 3 months ago he would have said no. But 3 months ago he was trying to be a proper galactic military cadet, following rules designed for species with natural advantages he didn't possess. If it's the only way to save everyone, he said finally, then yes, we're exactly that crazy. They took the mining elevator down into the depths of the shaft. The walls were lined with veins of exotic matter that pulsed with their own inner light. The energy readings on their equipment went wild as they descended deeper into the deposit. This is incredible, Sujin breathed, watching her geological scanner. The energy density down here could power a starship for decades, or blow up half a solar system if it goes unstable, Wanbin added helpfully. At the bottom of the shaft, they found the main extraction facility. Massive mining robots sat silent and still, their work interrupted by the Ravager attack. Control systems showed that extraction had been proceeding normally until the emergency evacuation. Okay, Hyunwoo said, studying the equipment. Here's what we're going to do. Wanbin, I need you to modify the extraction control so they can be triggered remotely. Define remotely, Wanbin said, already pulling out his tools. From the surface, we need to be able to threaten the Ravagers without actually being down here when it happens. And what exactly are we threatening them with? Daeho asked. Hyunwoo pointed to the extraction systems. We're going to tell them that unless they withdraw immediately, we'll overload every exotic matter deposit on the planet simultaneously. The resulting explosion will destroy the colony, the Ravagers, and probably crack the planet's crust. Will that actually work? Sujin asked. The physics say yes, Wanbin replied, running calculations on his portable computer. An uncontrolled cascade reaction in deposits this size would release approximately 10 to the 18th joules of energy instantaneously. In terms normal people can understand? Daeho requested. Big enough to be seen from orbit, possibly big enough to affect the planet's rotation. Sujin whistled softly. That's definitely big enough to get their attention. The beauty of it is that the Ravagers know we could do it, Hyunwoo explained. They've been studying galactic military doctrine, but human military history is full of people making threats they're absolutely willing to carry out. Mutually assured destruction, Daeho said, understanding. We can't win, but we can make sure they lose too. Wanbin was working frantically on the control systems, his tools sparking as he bypassed safety systems and rerouted power conduits. I can give you remote detonation capability, but the range will be limited. Maybe a few kilometers. That's far enough, Hyunwoo said. We just need to get to a communication array and broadcast our demands. And if they call our bluff? Sujin asked. Hyunwoo checked. The mining shaft elevator descended with mechanical precision, carrying death in biomechanical form. Hyunwoo could hear the alien sounds the Ravagers made as they communicated with each other. a mixture of electronic static and organic clicking that sent chills down his spine. 60 seconds. Soo-jin whispered from her position behind an overturned mining cart. Wonbin's hands moved frantically across the control panel, sparks flying as he bypassed the last safety protocols. Almost there. Just need to reroute the primary power conduits and... Done, he announced, stepping back from the smoking control system. Remote detonation is active. Trigger frequency is set to your comm unit, Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo looked at the small device in his hand. Such a simple thing to hold the power of planetary destruction. He clipped it to his belt and grabbed the plasma cutter. What are you doing? Daeho asked. Insurance, Hyunwoo replied, aiming the plasma cutter at the main support beam of the extraction facility. If the remote trigger fails, I'll cut through this beam. The facility collapses, damages the containment systems, and we get our unstable reaction anyway. That's suicide. Soo-jin protested. Maybe. But it guarantees the Ravagers don't get what they came for. The elevator reached the bottom of the shaft with a soft chime that seemed absurdly normal given the circumstances. The doors opened with a hiss and nightmare shapes began emerging into the extraction facility. The Ravagers were even more disturbing up close. Their biomechanical forms shifted constantly, adapting to their environment in real time. Some had multiple limbs that ended in tool-like appendages. Others had sensor arrays that looked like metallic flowers. All of them radiated an alien intelligence that was utterly cold and calculating. 4 life forms detected. One of them announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal mixed with organic breathing. Species classification, human. Threat level, minimal. That assessment was about to change dramatically. Soo-jin opened fire first, her modified plasma rifle sending bolts of energy toward the advancing Ravagers. The shots struck their adaptive armor and were absorbed harmlessly, but they served their purpose. The Ravagers' attention focused on the obvious threat while Hyunwoo moved toward the support beam. Resistance encountered, the lead Ravager reported. Initiating suppression protocols. Daeho joined the firefight, his weapon adding to the light show but having no real effect on the biomechanical entities. The Ravagers advanced methodically, their forms shifting to present smaller targets while weapon systems emerged from their bodies. Wonbin. Get to the service tunnel, Hyunwoo shouted over the noise of combat. Start heading for the surface. What about you? Wonbin called back, I'll be right behind you. Just need to finish this. The plasma cutter bit into the support beam, sending showers of sparks across the chamber. The beam was massive, designed to support the weight of the entire extraction facility. But the industrial cutter was making progress. One of the Ravagers noticed what he was doing and immediately shifted its attention from the others. Human is attempting to damage critical infrastructure. Termination priority elevated. The biomechanical entity launched itself across the chamber with impossible speed, its form reshaping into something like a metallic spider with razor-sharp limbs. Hyunwoo threw himself sideways as claws raked through the air where his head had been. Hyunwoo! Soo-jin screamed, trying to redirect her fire to help him. But Hyunwoo was already moving, rolling behind another support beam as the Ravager pursuit system tracked him. The plasma cutter was still in his hand, its energy cell showing half charge remaining. Structural damage detected, another Ravager announced. Facility integrity compromised. Recommend immediate evacuation. Negative, the lead entity replied. Exotic matter extraction must be completed. Eliminate human interference. That was when Hyunwoo realized something important. The Ravagers were afraid, not of him personally, but of what he might do to their carefully planned operation. They had studied galactic military tactics for years, but they had never encountered someone willing to destroy the very thing they were fighting over. Hey, he shouted over the combat noise. Ugly biomechanical freaks. You want to know what humans do when we can't win? He emerged from cover and raised the plasma cutter toward the support beam again. We make sure you can't win either. The plasma beam struck the support structure again, cutting deeper into the metal. Warning lights began flashing throughout the facility as structural integrity sensors detected critical damage. Human behavior is irrational, one of the Ravagers observed. Self-preservation instincts appear to be malfunctioning. Welcome to humanity, Daeho called out, reloading his weapon. We've been disappointing people with our survival instincts for thousands of years. The support beam was nearly severed now, held together by just a few centimeters of stressed metal. If it failed, the entire extraction facility would collapse. potentially destabilizing the exotic matter deposits and creating exactly the kind of uncontrolled reaction they had threatened. "Stop," the lead Ravager commanded, its biomechanical voice carrying new urgency. "Continued structural damage will result in cascading failure of containment systems." "That's the idea," Hyun-woo replied, not pausing in his work. "You will die as well. Probably. But you won't get your exotic matter and the colonists will be safe." For the first time, the Ravagers seemed uncertain. Their forms shifted nervously. Internal communications creating bursts of static and organic sounds. "This behavior pattern is not documented in Galactic military databases," one of them said. "That's because you've been studying the wrong military," Sujin said, moving to join Hyun-woo at the support beam. "You learned how Vorthak fight, how Nexari fight, how Gorvani fight. But you never learned how humans fight. How do humans fight?" the lead Ravager asked, genuine curiosity in its synthetic voice. Wonbin, who had been quietly working his way toward the service tunnel, answered from the shadows. "Dirty." The modified atmospheric processor he had been carrying suddenly activated, filling the chamber with a dense cloud of industrial solvent that was harmless to humans but played havoc with biomechanical systems. The Ravager's adaptive armor began smoking as the chemical mixture interfered with their organic components. "Toxic environment detected," several Ravagers announced simultaneously, initiating protective protocols. But their protective protocols were designed for combat environments, not industrial sabotage. As their biomechanical systems tried to adapt to the chemical attack, they became sluggish and less responsive. Daeho took advantage of their confusion to dash across the chamber and help Hyun-woo with the support beam. Together, their plasma cutters made quick work of the remaining metal. "Structural failure imminent," the facility's automated systems announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." The support beam groaned ominously, stress fractures appearing throughout its length. "Final warning," Hyun-woo called to the Ravagers. "Leave now or we all go down together." The lead Ravager's form shifted rapidly as it processed this information. Its biomechanical systems were clearly running multiple scenarios, trying to find a solution that would allow them to complete their mission. "Acceptable risk parameters exceeded," it finally announced. "Withdraw to minimum safe distance." "What about the exotic matter?" another Ravager asked. "Mission parameters have changed. Human tactical doctrine is unpredictable. Recommend full tactical reassessment before attempting another extraction." The Ravagers began retreating toward the elevator, their forms still smoking from Wonbin's chemical attack. But they moved in good order, clearly planning to regroup and try again later. That wasn't acceptable to Hyun-woo. "Wonbin," he called, "activate the remote trigger." Not to destroy the deposits, just to destabilize them enough to make extraction impossible for the next few years. "Are you sure?" Wonbin asked, his hand hovering over the control. "Do it." The modified extraction systems activated with a sound like thunder underground. Deep beneath them, exotic matter deposits that had been stable for millions of years suddenly became chaotic and unpredictable. Energy readings spiked wildly as the rare materials entered an unstable but not explosive state. "Extraction no longer possible," the lead Ravager announced after consulting its sensors. "Exotic matter has been rendered inaccessible." The support beam finally gave way with a tremendous crash, bringing down a section of the facility's roof. But the damage was controlled, creating debris rather than the catastrophic collapse that would have threatened the entire colony. Above them, the sounds of battle were changing. Without the promise of exotic matter to motivate them, the Ravager forces were withdrawing from their positions around the colony. The biomechanical entities were practical above all else, and there was no point in continuing a battle they could no longer win. "All Ravager forces are pulling back," Sujin reported, monitoring the communication frequencies. "They're leaving the system." "Just like that?" Daeho asked. "Just like that," Hyun-woo confirmed. "They came here for a specific resource. We made that resource impossible to obtain. From their perspective, continued fighting would be wasteful." Wonbin emerged from the service tunnel, his atmospheric processor finally running out of chemical solvent. "So we won?" Hyun-woo looked around the damaged extraction facility, at his three companions, who had trusted him with a plan that should have gotten them all killed, at the exotic matter deposits that were now safely inaccessible to anyone with hostile intentions. "We won," he agreed. Above them, The communication systems crackled with confused reports as Galactic forces tried to understand why their enemies had suddenly retreated. Commander Thane's voice cut through the chatter, demanding explanations that no one could provide. Because the explanation was simple and completely unprecedented in Galactic military history. 4 human cadets with improvised equipment and suicidal determination had done what centuries of military doctrine said was impossible. They had changed the rules of the game. The silence that fell over the battlefield was not the silence of death, but the silence of beings trying to process something they had never seen before. Somewhere in that silence was the beginning of a new understanding about what humans could accomplish when everything seemed hopeless. But for now, Yunwu was content to sit in the wreckage of the extraction facility and listen to his companions arguing about whose idea had been the craziest. It was, he thought, a very human way to celebrate a victory. Part 6, Recognition and New Understanding. The rescue shuttles arrived at the mining facility 47 minutes after the Ravagers had withdrawn from Kepler 442b. Hyun-woo and his companions were sitting in the damaged extraction chamber, sharing emergency rations and trying to process what they had just accomplished. When the shuttle doors opened, Commander Thane stepped out first, his massive Gorvani frame filling the doorway. Behind him came Sergeant Krev, several other instructors, and a full squad of security personnel. Their weapons were drawn, and their expressions suggested they were prepared for anything except what they actually found. 4 human cadets sitting calmly in the wreckage of an industrial facility, eating field rations, Cadets Kim, Park Lee, and Choi. Commander Thane said slowly, his voice carrying a mixture of confusion and barely controlled anger. You are in direct violation of explicit orders to remain in rear support positions. Hyunwoo stood up and attempted something resembling military posture. Yes, sir. We can explain. I certainly hope so, Thane replied. Because according to our tactical analysis, the Ravager withdrawal makes no strategic sense. They had superior position, superior numbers, and were winning the engagement. Then suddenly, for no apparent reason, they retreated. Sergeant Krev stepped forward, his yellow eyes fixed on the humans with suspicion. The tactical computers show no significant change in battlefield conditions that would justify enemy withdrawal. Yet somehow 4 cadets who were ordered to handle supply inventory ended up in the middle of a combat zone. We followed standard emergency protocols, Sujin said carefully. When we detected civilians in danger, we responded according to academy training. What civilians? One of the security officers asked. Wanbin pointed toward the elevator shaft. The mining crew that was trapped down here when the Ravagers attacked. We came to evacuate them. It was technically true. There had been mining personnel trapped in the facility. The fact that they had been evacuated hours earlier by automated systems was a detail they didn't volunteer. Commander Thane walked around the damaged extraction facility, his trained eye taking in the collapsed support beam, the modified control systems, and the chemical residue from Wanbin's atmospheric processor. Interesting evacuation techniques, he observed. And I suppose the industrial sabotage was also part of standard emergency protocols. Daeho shifted uncomfortably. We had to prevent the Ravagers from accessing critical resources, sir. What resources? Sergeant Krev demanded. The 4 humans exchanged glances. They could explain about the exotic matter deposits, the Ravager extraction operation, and their plan to destabilize the materials. But doing so would reveal that they had figured out things the senior military officers had missed. Hyunwoo made a decision that would have seemed impossible 3 months earlier. He looked Commander Thane directly in the eyes and told the truth. The Ravagers weren't here to destroy the colony, sir. They were here to steal exotic matter deposits from the mining operations. We prevented them from completing that objective. The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Thane's expression went through several rapid changes before settling on something that might have been respect mixed with disbelief. You're telling me, he said slowly, that 4 cadet-level humans identified an enemy objective that our entire intelligence apparatus missed. We had access to geological surveys that weren't included in the tactical briefings, Sujin explained. The Ravager positioning made more sense when you understood what they were really after. Sergeant Krev was studying his portable scanner, reading energy signatures from the mining shaft. These exotic matter readings are completely unstable. The deposits are impossible to extract safely now. Yes, sir, Wanbin confirmed. We made sure of that. How? Thane demanded. We overloaded the extraction systems and destabilized the molecular structure of the exotic matter. It will remain inaccessible for approximately 50 to 70 years depending on natural decay rates. Commander Thane sat down heavily on a piece of debris, his massive frame suddenly looking tired. Let me understand this correctly. 4 human cadets acting without authorization infiltrated an active combat zone, identified enemy objectives that our intelligence failed to detect, and successfully completed a mission that saved not only this colony, but potentially prevented the Ravagers from acquiring weapons-grade materials. That's an accurate summary, sir, Hyunwoo said. And you did this using maintenance, equipment, and emergency supplies. Yes, sir, against an enemy force that had successfully countered every standard military tactic we attempted. Yes, sir. Thane was quiet for a long moment, processing information that challenged everything he thought he knew about military capability and tactical doctrine. Sergeant Krev, he said finally, what's your assessment of this situation? The Vorthak instructor's scarred features showed an expression that might have been grudging admiration. Sir, in 30 years of military service, I have never seen anything like this. These humans accomplished more with improvised equipment than our entire battle group managed with standard military assets. They violated direct orders, one of the security officers pointed out. They saved thousands of lives, another replied. They succeeded where we failed, Sergeant Krev added. Quietly, Commander. Thane stood up and began pacing around the chamber, his forearms moving in the gestures Gorvani used when processing complex problems. Cadet Kim, he said finally, walk me through your tactical reasoning. From the beginning. Hyunwoo took a deep breath and explained everything. The geological surveys, the pattern recognition that identified Ravager objectives, the decision to use unconventional tactics, and the plan to turn the enemy's goals against them. As he spoke, he watched the faces of the military officers. Confusion gave way to understanding. Understanding gave way to amazement, and amazement gave way to something that looked like fear. This is not how galactic military doctrine works, one of the instructors said when Hyunwoo finished. No, sir, Hyunwoo agreed. It's how human military doctrine works. Humans don't have military doctrine, Sergeant Krev protested. You're the newest species in the galactic community. You have no experience with interstellar warfare. We have thousands of years of experience with terrestrial warfare, Sujin corrected. Wars fought by beings with no natural advantages, no specialized evolutionary traits, nothing but intelligence and determination. Wars where the weaker side often won through unconventional tactics, Jiho added. Wars where survival mattered more than honor, Wanbin finished. Commander, Thane stopped pacing and stared at the humans with something approaching awe. You're saying that human military history is fundamentally different from galactic military history? Yes, sir, Hyunwoo said. Galactic species evolved natural advantages that shaped their tactical thinking. Humans evolved the ability to think around problems that seemed impossible to solve. To adapt faster than the enemy could counter, Sujin added. To use the enemy's strengths against them, Daeho continued. To never give up, even when defeat seemed certain, Wanbin concluded. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every galactic species had military traditions based on their evolutionary advantages. Vorthak used speed and natural weapons. Nexari used technological integration, Gorvani used strength and endurance. But humans had developed military thinking based on having no advantages at all. This changes everything, one of the instructors whispered. Commander Thane nodded slowly. If human tactical thinking is fundamentally different from galactic doctrine, then we need to understand it. Study it, learn from it. You want us to teach you how to think like humans? Hyunwoo asked. I want you to teach the galaxy how to think like humans, Thane replied. Because if 4 cadets with maintenance equipment can accomplish what they did today, imagine what properly trained and equipped human officers could achieve. Sergeant Krev was examining the damaged control systems, his expression thoughtful. The Ravagers adapted to our tactics because our tactics were predictable, based on evolutionary advantages that haven't changed in millions of years. But human tactics, Commander Thane said, understanding dawning in his voice, are based on adaptation itself, on changing faster than the enemy can respond. We've been teaching galactic military doctrine to humans. one of the instructors realized. When we should have been teaching human military doctrine to the galaxy, the conversation was interrupted by incoming communications from the rescue fleet. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as news of the Ravager withdrawal spread. No one could understand why the biomechanical entities had abandoned what appeared to be a successful operation. How do we explain this to Galactic Command? The communications officer asked. Commander Thane looked at the 4 humans who had somehow managed to save the day using methods that didn't officially exist. We tell them the truth, he said. We tell them that everything we thought we knew about military tactics needs to be reconsidered. And we recommend immediate integration of human strategic thinking into all military training programs. Will they believe it? Sergeant Krev asked. They'll have to, Thane replied. The evidence is right here. 2 weeks later, Hyun-woo found himself standing in a conference room aboard the flagship of the Galactic Defense Fleet. Around the table sat the highest-ranking military officers from every major species in the galaxy. The same beings who 3 months earlier had considered humans too weak to be real soldiers. Admiral Korex, a massive Gorvani with ritual scars covering his gray hide, spoke first. The tactical analysis of the Kepler 442b operation has been reviewed by our best strategic minds. The conclusion is unanimous. The human approach to warfare represents a fundamental paradigm shift in military thinking. The Ravagers had studied our tactics for decades, added General Thiss, a Vorthak whose yellow eyes gleamed with newfound respect. They knew exactly how each species would respond to their attacks, but they had no preparation for human tactical thinking. Admiral Prism, her crystalline Nexari form chiming softly as she spoke, leaned forward. Our analysis shows that human military concepts like asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, and tactical improvisation are completely foreign to traditional galactic doctrine, which is exactly why they worked, Commander Thane said from his position near the holographic display. The Ravagers couldn't counter tactics they had never encountered. Hyun-woo listened to senior officers discussing concepts that seemed obvious to him, but were revolutionary to everyone else in the room. The idea that smaller forces could defeat larger ones through cunning rather than strength. The concept that equipment could be improvised rather than standardized. The notion that breaking rules might be more effective than following them. Cadet Kim, Admiral Korex said, turning to face him directly. Your tactical report has been studied by military academies across the galaxy. The consensus is that human strategic thinking offers capabilities that our traditional approaches lack. What kind of capabilities, sir? Hyun-woo asked. Unpredictability, General Thiss replied. Our tactics are based on evolutionary advantages that haven't changed in millions of years. An enemy that studies us long enough can predict our responses with high accuracy. But human tactics, Admiral Prism added, are based on intellectual adaptation rather than biological programming. They can change and evolve in real time, making them nearly impossible to counter. The Galactic Defense Council has authorized a new training initiative, Admiral Korex announced. Human strategic integration will become a mandatory component of officer training throughout the galaxy. Hyun-woo felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. 3 months ago, he had been the Academy's failure, barely able to carry his own equipment. Now the galaxy's military leadership wanted to learn from human thinking. There's more, Commander Thane said. The 4 of you are being promoted to lieutenant status and assigned to establish the Human Tactical Studies program at the Academy. Sir, Sujin spoke up. We're still cadets ourselves. We haven't even completed basic training. You've completed something more valuable than basic training, Admiral Korex replied. You've proven that human military thinking can succeed where conventional tactics fail. That makes you exactly the instructors we need. The meeting continued for several more hours as military leaders from across the galaxy discussed how to integrate human concepts into their existing doctrine. Hyun-woo watched species that had spent millennia perfecting their natural advantages, now talking about learning to think like the weakest beings in the Academy. After the official session ended, Sergeant Krev approached Hyun-woo privately. The scarred Vorthak's expression was thoughtful rather than the dismissive contempt he had shown months earlier. I owe you an apology, Lieutenant Kim, he said formally. I believed human weakness would make you liabilities in combat. I failed to recognize that what I saw as weakness was actually a different kind of strength. What kind of strength, Sergeant? Krev considered his words carefully. The strength to survive without advantages, to win without overwhelming power, to adapt without evolutionary programming. He paused. The strength to never give up, even when victory seems impossible. That evening, Hyunwoo stood in his quarters, which had been upgraded significantly since his promotion. Instead of cramped cadet accommodations, he now had proper living space and communication equipment. He activated the terminal and placed a call to Earth. Jiyeon's face appeared on the screen, beaming with pride. I saw the news reports about your promotion. The whole planet is celebrating what you and your friends accomplished. It still doesn't feel real, Hyunwoo admitted. A few months ago, I was ready to quit the academy because I thought humans didn't belong here. What changed your mind? Hyunwoo thought about the question. What had changed? The humans were still physically weaker than other species. They still lacked natural weapons or armor. They still had to work twice as hard to achieve what came naturally to others. But they had proven something that the galaxy had never understood about humanity. Realized that being human isn't about having advantages, he said finally. It's about finding ways to succeed without them. It's about refusing to accept that any problem is unsolvable. And now the galaxy wants to learn how to think like humans. They've discovered that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in having every advantage. Sometimes the greatest strength is in being too stubborn to give up until you find a way to win. Jiyeon smiled. That sounds like our family motto. That sounds like the human motto, Hyunwoo corrected. After ending the call, he walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness were threats the galaxy hadn't imagined yet. Enemies with advantages that seemed insurmountable. Challenges that appeared impossible to overcome. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, Hyunwoo wasn't worried about facing the impossible. Because he had learned the most important lesson of all. Humans specialized in doing impossible things. They always had, and they always would. The galaxy was finally ready to learn what that meant. 1 year after the Battle of Kepler 442b, as military historians had begun calling it, Hyunwoo stood before a class of 50 cadets from 12 different species. The classroom was designed differently now, with modular equipment that could adapt to various physiologies and learning styles. Today we will study the siege of Terra Nova, he announced, activating the holographic display. Can anyone tell me why the defenders succeeded despite being outnumbered 10-1? A young Nexari cadet raised her crystalline hand. Because they used terrain modification tactics that made enemy numerical superiority irrelevant? Partially correct, Hyunwoo said. But that's the what, not the why. Anyone want to try explaining the underlying principle? A Gorvani Cadet spoke up, his deep voice careful and thoughtful. Because they didn't try to win the battle their enemies expected them to fight. They changed the nature of the conflict itself. Excellent, Hyunwoo replied. That's the core of human tactical thinking. When you can't win according to existing rules, you change the rules. The classroom discussion continued for another hour, with cadets from species that had once considered humans weak, now eagerly studying human military history. The transformation still amazed Hyunwoo sometimes. After class, he walked across the academy grounds toward the new Human Tactical Studies building. The structure had been completed 6 months earlier, designed specifically to house the growing program that was revolutionizing galactic military education. Inside, he found Soo-jin working with a team of Vorthak engineers on adaptive equipment designs. The reptilian beings were natural craftsmen, and they had embraced the human concept of improvised technology with enthusiasm. How's the new plasma rifle design coming? Hyunwoo asked. Better than expected, Soo-jin replied, holding up a weapon that looked nothing like standard galactic military equipment. Instead of one optimized configuration, it has 17 different modes that can be switched in real time. Adaptability over standardization, one of the Vorthak engineers hissed approvingly. Very elegant concept. Down the hall, Wonbin was leading a seminar on electronic warfare techniques. Through the open door, Hyunwoo could see alien cadets learning to think like hackers, rather than traditional military technicians. The key, Wonbin was explaining, is not to break their systems, but to make their systems work against them. Turn their own advantages into weaknesses. A Nexari cadet asked a question about computer viruses, and Wonbin launched into an explanation of digital psychology that would have been impossible before humans introduced the concept of thinking like your enemy instead of simply fighting them. Hyunwoo continued to the command simulation center, where Daeho was running tactical exercises with advanced cadets. The scenarios were based on real human military operations from Earth's history, adapted for galactic warfare conditions. Remember, Daeho was saying to a mixed group of species, conventional tactics assume you have resources proportional to your objectives. Unconventional tactics assume you have to accomplish impossible things with whatever you can find. The simulation showed a small human force using psychological warfare and environmental manipulation to defeat a much larger enemy. The alien cadets watched in fascination as numerical disadvantage became tactical advantage through creative thinking. Instructor Park, a young Gorvani asked, how do you teach soldiers to think creatively under combat stress? You don't teach them to think creatively, Daeho replied. You teach them that creative thinking is survival. When conventional options fail, creativity becomes instinct. It was a very human answer to a very human problem. The galaxy was learning, but it was a slow process to change thinking patterns that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution. Hyunwoo's personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Commander Thane's face appeared on the small screen, his expression serious. Lieutenant Kim, please report to strategic planning immediately. We have a situation. The promotion still felt strange. 3 months earlier, Hyunwoo had been elevated to lieutenant and given command of the new Adaptive Tactics Division. It was an unusual rank for someone so young, but these were unusual times. The Strategic Planning Center was a hive of activity when he arrived. Officers from every major species were gathered around holographic displays showing tactical information from across the galaxy. What's the situation? Hyunwoo asked. The Ravagers are back, Commander Thane replied grimly. But they've learned from their defeat at Kepler 442b. They're using modified tactics that counter our standard responses. Admiral Vex activated the main display, showing a star map with multiple red indicators, 3 systems under attack simultaneously. The Ravagers are adapting faster than our conventional forces can compensate. Hyunwoo studied the tactical information, his mind automatically falling into the pattern recognition mode that had served him so well. The Ravager attacks were coordinated, but they followed new patterns he hadn't seen before. They're learning, he realized, not just studying our tactics but actually adapting their own thinking to become more unpredictable. Which means what exactly? General Morok asked. It means they're becoming more human in their approach to warfare, Hyunwoo said. Less reliance on overwhelming force, more emphasis on adaptation and psychological warfare. The implications were unsettling. If the Ravagers could learn to think like humans while retaining their biomechanical advantages, they would become nearly unstoppable. Recommendations? Admiral Vex asked. Hyunwoo looked around the room at the assembled officers. A year ago, they would never have asked for his opinion. Now they were depending on human tactical thinking to solve a problem that conventional wisdom couldn't handle. We need to do what humans do best, he said. We need to adapt faster than they can adapt, change the game before they figure out the rules. How? Commander Thane asked. By not playing their game at all, Hyunwoo replied. They're expecting us to respond to their attacks. Instead, we anticipate where they'll attack next and make sure they find something completely different than what they're prepared for. The planning session went on for hours, with human tactical concepts being integrated with galactic military resources in ways that had never been attempted before. By the time they finished, they had developed a response plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, which was exactly what made it human. 2 weeks later, Hyunwoo found himself aboard a fleet command ship, watching as the new tactics were put into practice. Instead of responding to Ravager attacks, Galactic forces had identified likely targets and prepared surprises. The Ravagers arrived at what they expected to be a helpless mining colony, and instead found a carefully prepared trap that used their own adaptability against them. Biomechanical entities that were designed to learn from their enemies discovered that some lessons were more dangerous than others. Target confirmed neutralized, came the report from Tactical. Ravager forces withdrawing in confusion. Similar reports came in from the other target systems. The biomechanical entities had learned to think more like humans, but they hadn't learned the most important human lesson of all. When fighting humans, expect the unexpected. After the operation, Hyunwoo was called to Admiral Vex's private office. The Nexari flag officer's crystalline features reflected the satisfaction of a successful mission. The Galactic Council has approved expansion of the Human Tactical Integration Program, she announced. Every military academy in the galaxy will now include human strategic thinking as core curriculum. That's quite an honor, Hyunwoo said. It's more than that, Admiral Vex replied. It's recognition that human military thinking represents a fundamental evolution in galactic warfare. A new way of approaching problems that seemed impossible to solve. She paused, her crystalline form chiming softly as she considered her words. A year ago, most of the galaxy considered humans to be military curiosities. Interesting but ultimately irrelevant to serious warfare. Today, human tactical concepts are being studied by every major military power. And tomorrow? Hyunwoo asked. Tomorrow we face threats we haven't imagined yet, Admiral Vex said. But thanks to human thinking, we'll be ready to adapt to anything. As Hyunwoo left the flagship and returned to the academy, he reflected on how much had changed. The humans were no longer the weakest cadets struggling with equipment designed for other species. They were the teachers showing the galaxy new ways to think about old problems. But the most important change wasn't in the curriculum or the tactics or the technology. The most important change was in how the galaxy understood what it meant to be human. Humans weren't the strongest or the fastest or the most technically advanced species. But they were the species that never stopped trying to find a way to win, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. And in a galaxy full of threats that seemed impossible to defeat, that made them exactly what everyone needed. The future would bring new challenges, new enemies, new problems that seemed unsolvable. But the galaxy had learned something precious from a small blue planet at the edge of civilized space. Sometimes the greatest strength was not in having all the advantages. Sometimes the greatest strength was in refusing to believe that any disadvantage was permanent. Sometimes the greatest strength was in being human. As Hyunwoo walked across the academy grounds under alien stars, he could hear the sounds of cadets from a dozen worlds studying the military history of a species that had once been considered too weak to fight. They were learning what humans had always known. That victory wasn't about being stronger than your enemies. Victory was about being too stubborn to give up until you found a way to win.